All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As promised, I'm going to do a paint stream today. My name is Ben Williams. I paint all the Car Wars stuff, all the minis that we do here at Steve Jackson Games. I'm also one of the production artists, so I work on layouts and sometimes color munchkins and stuff. Um, I really didn't know what all to do today. I only have an hour, so I tried to prep as many things as I could. I've got some stuff here at this table that I think will be helpful for hopefully people of every level. So I guess Brandon will be there looking at the chat window. So if you have any questions, want to see anything specific, just type those in there and he will relay them to me.
Hello,
Um,
everyone. I'm Brandon, and yeah, I'll be relaying all your questions to Ben throughout the stream. So feel free to ask them.
yep. And I guess with that out of the way, we can start some painting.
Yeah, I'm going to switch over to the
Brandon's got the
overhead. We'll
brush
take a
cam.
look at all these models you've got in front of you if you want to talk about any of them.
Okay, so this what I'm just going to try to do a quick little dry brushing tutorial on. That's one of the easiest ways that you can get a miniature looking tabletop ready quickly. So what I did here is I just gave this an airbrushing of some of this. This is a P3 Formula Necrotite Green. Formula P3 is one of my favorite paint lines. I don't know why it is. I've tried a lot of others, but these just tend to work really well for me, so that's what I use. So I airbrushed that with this, and then I washed it with this, which is GW or Citadel. I really like their washes, so that's what I've used for this. I washed it with some of this Coelia green shade, and this one I'm just going to dry brush some more green on there, and hopefully that'll start looking good real fast, and you can see how that looks. Here, I've got a car that I airbrushed some yellow and orange on. So I was going to try to do a little quick freehanding to try to show you how to make some cool and easy flames with that. Um, this is another one I started airbrushing with, and I made this little sort of custom sticker, and I'm going to try to put that on there and maybe do a little bit of a sort of a custom stencil thing while we sit here. And then I've just got some wrecks, which probably can do some more dry brushing. And then if we have time, I have a car that I have done nothing in advance with, and maybe I can just do a little bit of a wet blending tutorial on that or something else. I've got a lot of colors, so if you guys have a specific color you want to see this car done in, you can hit that up in the comments. This is a stiletto. I believe this fellow is named Shuriken. I can't remember what this guy's name is, but he's one of my favorites. Same with this one. This is a wrecked scarab, and this is a wrecked dragon, I believe. Brandon, maybe you can help me out. It's been a while since I looked at the name.
It's been a while since I looked at any of
and
them.
I have another one in here. This one's been floating in warm water for like half an hour. I tried to set this up for a rust tutorial, a salt weathering tutorial. So that's going to be another thing that I could do pretty quickly.
All right.
So where should I begin? We don't. Brandon,
It's up to you. Maybe the green.
All right. Well, let's start with just dry brushing this guy.
Yeah, we're gonna.
So this is like I said, we started off with this Necrotite green, a wash of Quelea green shade, and I had to give that time to dry overnight. So now I'm just gonna dry brush it, and you can see all the details as they start to pop out. Oh, and a quick word about these vehicles. These are all rejects that we received over the past few months from our manufacturer, and so for whatever reason, we did not feel that they were up to our standards. So they are not exact. They're not perfect examples of what you guys will get either with your Kickstarter or when you buy these models down the road. So I just wanted to say that, put that out there.
The models you'll get will be even better.
Yes, they should be even better. So one of the first things with dry brushing is you want to get a lot of, let me see, I'm going the wrong way. You want to get a lot of the paint off the brush. Dry brushing really means dry. So you want to get rid of as much as possible. Now normally I have a old cotton t-shirt that I use for stuff like this. It's a lot more absorbent and you won't get any little paper fibers in your brush. So if you just have an old t-shirt, I just recommend just like turning that into a paint rag right now. It can be really helpful. So then once you've got that, I am one of these painters that likes to paint on the back of my hand as a palette or otherwise. So I just run a little bit there, see that it looks about right. And then it does, so I'm just going to start going to town. And once you have it the right consistency on the brush, you can just really go crazy. And just bring it all over. And just start covering up everything. Oh, wrong way again. So what it's doing, what this does is it just evens out the layers, and it makes the wash that has settled in the recesses kind of pop a little bit more. So it's just sort of a quick and simple way to add some contrast and definition. Another thing that works really well, but it's just not really worth a tutorial. Games Workshop's line of contrast paints, just everyone just loves those things. So that's another quick way. But this works really well too. It doesn't take that long, and it is a way to add a little bit more personalization, make it your own paint job. But contrast paints, you basically they're like washes that you just put over like a white undercoat. There's different undercoats you can use too. And for people that want a pretty good paint job quick, those are really popular. So now that I've gotten that sort of green base, I'm going to take a little bit more green, mix that with some white, which is off camera. Just sort of get that in there. We have even lighter, a little more. And let's just add a little yellow too.
So you had already done the wash on this green?
Yeah, the wash was already on there. It's just because it takes a while to dry. I mean, if I was putting it on now, I don't know if we would have time to see it finished.
Right. You usually do the wash first before you dry brush?
Yes. Dry washes, even the best ones don't always dry evenly. They'll leave some splotching, which I don't know. There's still a little bit that you can kind of see there. It was a lot more noticeable before that first coat of dry brush, and it's the sort of thing where I might, in other circumstances, want to dry brush this guy even more to really get rid of it. But I think this bit of highlighting here that I'm about to do will probably be enough so that you can't even really notice it. So this is the mix of white and the same green and a little bit of yellow. So you just drag it over pretty quickly. And this time, since this is doing more is like picking up the edges, you just kind of want to do it a little faster. Now, dry brushing is one of those techniques that most people know. If you've painted a little bit, you know how to do it. And so the reason why I went ahead and brought along something to dry brush anyway is because I think I don't know, everybody does it differently. And when you read about dry brushing, there's really no explanation of the technique. And for me, I think you get the best results with a big brush like I'm doing here, and these sort of very active, rapid strokes. It helps really to have that big brush.
Have you used makeup brushes? I've seen some people.
Oh no, I haven't done that.
I picked some up, and then we had the big freeze back in
Oh,
February, and my garage got totaled, so I haven't had a chance to test them out yet.
oh, that sucks. I also had a pipe burst in the garage, but it was not totaled. It waited until the very end when things were getting back to normal again, and that's when the ice that had frozen in that pipe finally melted.
Oh no! Yeah,
And
such a pain.
yeah, we got really lucky. We found a guy to come take care of it that same day because he was a friend of a friend. We just really lucked out there.
Nice.
All right, so that's pretty good. And what we're going to do is one more. We're going to just use pure white this time. And this time you want to get almost all of it off the brush if you can. You want to have just a little bit left. Because all we're going to do really is kind of just try to just touch the edges just a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And pick up the corners, pick up all those lines. And an important part of dry brushing like this is repetition. When you get as much paint as you can off the brush, but then you go over the same spot over and over and over again, and
Right.
that's how you pick up that detail without too much like smushing on there. Um,
Someone is asking, the first green that you used today here, was that the same green that you initially airbrushed onto the model?
yeah,
So you primed it green, or did the base coat with green with the airbrush, and then did a wash, and then went back to the same green.
yep.
All right.
All right, so that's pretty good. Now I haven't really been working with this area over here because in my mind this is like a ram, so this is all going to be metal, so it's not going to be this color.
Got it.
So at this point, really, what you can do. This is another thing. A lot of an easy way to do this is just to start with black, but I'm going to go a little different with all these metal parts. I'm just going to try to get those done as fast as I can with this big brush.
Someone asked, do you ever reload the paint while you're dry brushing?
Yeah, yeah. You just try to smear a little bit more off the towel. That's something that comes up more if I'm painting for a game that has where you want to do a lot of models, where like a big full army game.
Yeah.
And so then I'll like as I go, I'll dry brush, dry brush, dry brush, and so if you're painting, when I paint for games like that, I usually want to do 10 or 15 models at a time, and uh,
Kind of like an
so
assembly line.
exactly, and then you definitely want to reload that dry brush, and so sometimes you can just pick up more of that same paint from your rag. Other times you just have to get more out, maybe even remix certain parts.
No, you say
Normally,
usually you use a cotton rag. Do you think that works better for dry brushing?
definitely, it
Than
just it picks up more, and the problem with a napkin like this is just the little bit of water I'm putting on it is gonna start to degrade it. So it's gonna
yeah,
get mushy. It's not gonna be as responsive with picking up the paint,
it
and you're
falls apart
also
too, right?
it falls apart too. Yeah, and you can get little bits of paper
Yeah,
in the paint, which is not great.
I don't like that.
No. So yes, I am painting the guns blue right now. They're going to be metal.
What color blue is it?
This is a P3 Troll Blood base.
Okay.
Now, what I usually really like for this is P3's Gravedigger Denim, but when I got it here and opened it, I realized it was almost gone.
Oh no.
So I didn't really have enough to use. But this is very close. It's not quite as dark, but it'll still work for what I want.
And these are going to be the metallic parts, right?
Right. These are going to be metallic. Now, what's funny is somehow in my mind as a miniature painter, and I think in most people's minds, just guns are always like metal, even though there's no rule that says that. And if you look at a tank, obviously, like its barrel's not metal, all its guns aren't metal, but somehow that just works. And a lot of miniature painting is readability. And for some reason, since our brains just really think guns should be metal, that just tends to work. Like you just want to do them as metal because then that's people can look at it. Oh, that's metal. That's a gun.
Right.
Even though it's a little bit, it's not exactly intuitive 100%.
I'm looking to see if there's any more questions here.
Um,
I don't see anything. Let's see.
oh, and these look like exhaust pipes, so those should also be metal.
Yeah, we're streaming out, everyone. We're streaming to Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and we should be putting things up on YouTube afterwards.
So I'm gonna let it dry for a little while.
All right.
Oh, I missed a spot. Hopefully it'll be good to go in a few minutes. These are acrylics, so shouldn't be a big deal. I guess I could start on the windows. Let me do the windows real quick. This is another quick thing you can do is even though I've got some green on the windshield, you can still just take a wash. In this case, I got the opposite of a green. We've got a Carrollburg Crimson. So I'm just going to wash those on the windows.
That's a crimson wash.
Yeah, crimson wash. And let's
Crimson
see.
over green.
Crimson over green.
All right.
It'll look a little weird, but
At first.
yeah, I think it'll just give enough color to define it. Back when I first started painting these, there was just a question in my mind of like, well, what color should the windshields be? Because whenever you paint models, there's always sort of a question of like realism versus, I guess, just aesthetics, right? And
Right.
windshields, they're pretty much going to range from like clear to black. So that just the very first windshield I painted was black. That was on I think its name is Dragon. It's the car that kind of looks like he looks a little 50s. He's got a couple of big flamethrowers on him. And I painted him purple.
All right.
I don't know why I'm gendering the cars, but I painted it purple. Um, and after that, it was just like, well, you know what? The windshields can be other colors. They can be whatever color I want. And that's the way I've been going with it. So this could just be a black wash, but I'm doing crimson instead. This may need a couple coats
Yeah.
to really take the effect. But for now, that's just another quick little part of the process. The windows are done very quickly. And so now I really will put it off to the side to dry for a little while.
Someone asked, do you do any streaming when you're not on duty with Steve Jackson Games?
Screaming or screening?
Off-duty streaming. Do you do any other streams?
Oh, right. No, I really don't. I think about it a lot. The one that I do occasionally is not really a painting stream, and it hasn't happened since COVID, is at Belle of Lost Souls, which is a miniatures game website in town. We would just sort of do a paint and chat every Thursday and paint models while we talked about stuff that had gone on in the industry. So the one I've got next is the one where I'm trying to do some salt weathering. So what I started with here, I think this guy's name is Jackal, but again, I should probably just, if I can't remember exactly what it is, just not say. So salt weathering is a cool technique. It's a great way to get like a rusty, beat up vehicle feel, whether it's a tank or in this case a car. You start with like a nice sort of base primer. This is like a really deep red. So I started with that. Then you spray it with a little bit of sealant, and while that sealant is still wet, you're going to sprinkle some salt on it. After that, ideally, you want to airbrush over that just as you would any other time. Now, for this, I did not use an airbrush because I know not everyone has one, so I wanted to use something that's a little bit more accessible. So this is just a different colored primer. It's a white primer followed by a yellow primer. So hopefully, now that this has been in sort of soaking in hot water for a little while, I'll be able to just scrape this with this brush, and all the salt will start to come off, and you'll get left with this cool patina. Well, not really a patina, but just all these little everywhere where there was salt is now coming up, and it's revealing the that
How do you get the salt to stick to it?
with varnish or sealant.
You ever use hairspray?
You can use hairspray. Yeah, that's another thing. I used model sealant because that's just what I happen to have around.
Okay.
But yeah, and hopefully you guys could see it. But that seemed to have worked out pretty well. So there's not
yeah.
even any airbrushing here. It's just with varnish. Usually when I do this, I have done this with a couple tanks of my own. Also some bases where I just wanted to look like the models were hanging out in like a rusty old sort of factory setting. And then I've done it also quite a bit with terrain. And we want to give it a nice wash because I'm going to put some paint in it. I want to make sure there's as little salt as possible left because that could crystallize during the drying process. So you want to make sure it's got a good rinse afterwards. But yeah, he's really kind of too wet right now to do anything with other than give a wash to. So I'm going to give it an Agrax Earthshade wash. It's another GW wash, Citadel wash. And hopefully that will, this little bit of water that's left in it won't really mess with that. The other thing I'm a little worried about is because this is going straight onto primer, that the primer might be a little too glossy and it might not sink in exactly how I want, but let's try it anyway. Let's get this bowl out of the way. And bring it back in. Got our Agrax over here. And a little bit of that water still being there can actually sometimes help to pull the wash more evenly around the model, because sometimes I was talking about how washes can be uneven earlier. Part of that is because you will just sort of, you might miss a spot on your first pass, and then it will just sort of, you'll be able to see that that transition where your brush went past, where there's wash here and then no wash in another place. But if it's wet, that water can actually sort of wick the wash into all the cracks and crevices and make it more even. So it's actually kind of a good thing that he's a little wet. So yeah, it ended up a little bit more polka dotted than I might have liked, but overall pretty good. The next step for this would be probably to dry brush it with a white or an off-white once this is all dried. I don't know if there will be enough time for that during this stream, but certainly possible. And if there is, I'll try to do that.
Yeah, we've been going about 20 minutes, so we might have some time.
Okay, cool. So while that one is drying, let's work on this guy. A lot of the fun I had doing these cars when I was painting them over the past few months was just freehand detailing. That for some people that's a little tough. So what I did with this guy, I actually made with just an X-Acto knife and some painter's tape. I made some kind of lightning bolts. So this is something I've tried in the past. It can be a little tricky, but it can also work really well. So I'm just going to put this over the front. And it's really important, of course, to make sure that it sticks down properly. You want to get every edge put down so no paint can lap over it. So that's on there pretty good now. I also have some of this. This is a little bit higher grade than your home painter's tape. This is Tamiya. It's specifically tape they make for airbrushing models. It comes off and on a little bit more easily. It's not quite as sticky, so it's less likely to damage detail. I trust that this will do okay. So I'm going to use this to just kind of tape off some other areas. It's also smaller, so you can just sort of more curve it easily here on it like I'm doing. Now, again, normally this is something I would use an airbrush for, but I can't really have an airbrush in here. And like I was saying earlier, not everybody has an airbrush. So I want to do something that I know everybody out there can do pretty easily. So that's all on there. So now I need to hope that it's sealed enough. Let's see, what color should I do over this purple? Let's do kind of a crazy blue. So I've got this Meridius blue, which is like an ocean blue.
Yeah, Chad is wondering if you have any advice about getting started with airbrushes, any particular opinions on makes or models and stuff. Things that wouldn't overwhelm a beginner.
Yeah, no, it totally does. I still, in a lot of ways, think of myself as a beginner, even though I've been doing it for like 4 or 5 years, because in all that time, I've still really not managed to master it. Airbrushes can be really frustrating because there are just a million different ways they can go wrong. And every time I ever think that I have airbrushing figured out, a different component seems to break down.
Right.
Recently, I bought a new compressor, which I don't regret, but it turned out I didn't need it. It seemed like just not enough air was getting pushed through. So I bought the new compressor, had exactly the same problem. I finally figured out it was something to do with the nozzle. So I replaced my nozzle with a friend's old airbrush nozzle, and then it worked again. Now I've digressed a lot. So back to the initial question of advice for beginners. The Badger Patriot 150, I believe, or 105 is
105.
105. That is kind of the go-to. That's really like the one you want to start with, for sure. It's fairly inexpensive. Um, you can buy it on Amazon or from Badger. It it's just one of the easiest ones to work with. Other than that, it's easier than ever now to get a good compressor, and that's something else you can get on Amazon. 4 years ago, when I was first starting to try to airbrush, like a good compressor was usually 300, and now you can get a slightly better compressor for less than 100 on Amazon. And I wish that I could remember because like I said, I just bought one, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So first, let me do this real quick, and then I can check my phone history and look at the thing I ordered. So I've got everything taped down. I've got my sort of cool turquoisey color. So now I'm just gonna go over it like this. You want it too thick, not too thick, not too thin. Um, and it's going to take a couple coats. I don't really need to do a couple coats though, because this is not going to end up as like a finished perfect model. So
Someone's asking, what do beginners need to know about using an airbrush space-wise? Since we mentioned we couldn't use one in the studio today.
yeah, we don't want to use one here. There's way too many electronics.
Yeah.
They're really not.
There's plenty of space in here.
Yeah.
For using an airbrush, but we wouldn't want to have all that particulate stuff.
Yeah, getting sucked into these computers and fans and cameras and stuff. A lot of people will invest in. It's basically like a big box with a fan to suck up all that particulate. I don't even bother with that. I just have it in a corner of a room, and it definitely does leave some weird dust around, but it doesn't. Like 99% of what you spray ends up on the surface in front of you.
Right.
So I personally don't find it necessary to have that like vent box where you can suck all that particulate up, but a lot of people do. I would say just as long as you have a space in an area where, like, you don't want to use it in your living room, because you will get paint dust on nice things. It'll get in your furniture, but I have one little sort of studio room set aside in my house, and in there it's fine, for me anyway.
Yeah, I set mine up in my garage.
Yeah, and that's exactly the sort of thing. It's not going to be a big deal if you get some weird, colorful dust,
right,
on tools and whatnot. That's probably fine. All right, so normally I would do a few more coats because it's not really that even, but we're just really looking for the decal effect. So did it work? Or sorry, the stencil effect. Let's see if it worked. You know what? I do need to do some more because it's not even, just pulling off that one piece is not even visible. So that actually dried really quickly, so I don't feel weird about putting on another coat. It should be a little lighter. So the two colors I'm using now are the Meridius Blue and Frostbite. Frostbite is a really pale blue. So those are mixed together to get this kind of sea foam-ish color. You know what? Let's blend one more streak of pure Frostbite in there. So it's going to go down the middle, kind of put a little brighter area in the middle. Let's see how well this worked. That turned out okay. It wasn't so much the stencil. What you see here is once you've got that area covered, it can be hard to remember the exact value of the paint underneath it. So my only real problem with this is that it's a little lighter. So I went really light with this color over the top when I should have probably gone a little darker.
Right.
But what's cool is now that that's been done, it gives you this really perfect guide to follow. So I can always just go back in there and clean it up a bit. But anyway, yeah, that's something you can do as a way to get some cool design fairly easily. And there are also just a million companies out there that'll sell you stencils that look like, pretty much everything you can think of. All right, let's go back to our green car from earlier. Oh, there we go. So I did bring along some metallic paint. What did I do with it? Is it still in the box of paint? Oh no, I took it out. So give that a good shake. This is a P3 cold steel. Just a nice metallic paint.
Where do you get your P3 paints at? I haven't.
You really have to get them online, at least in Austin.
Okay.
If you can find a store that has a good War Machine selection, or Privateer Press miniature selection, they'll usually also stock their paint.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
In town, we do have our game castle that sells them, but it's been shuttered for COVID for months, so I've been having to get them online. And I get them from Noble Knight. Noble Knight tends to have the best selection at any given time because I usually want to put a big order in all at once. All right, so and you can find some on Amazon too.
Do you prefer the pot style paint pots?
I really do. Bottles? I really do. I don't know how much of it is just what I'm used to, but I just find the dropper bottles frustrating. They're always drying out on me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you squirt it out and it starts to dry very quickly.
Oh, do you ever use a wet palette?
I don't. Hunter and I were just texting about the other day. He was talking about a wet palette and why I don't use one. He actually got me excited enough about one to order one, and it's just sat there unopened because it's just, for whatever reason, it's just not part of my process. You should definitely try it,
dude. It's kind of a game changer.
That's what everyone says. I tried one a few years back, and it was not an artist wet palette. It was like a game manufacturer's wet palette, and that might have been part of the problem. But it didn't work very well. Mostly what it did was it just never seemed to have enough water in it, and the edges would curl up and curl into what I was doing, and it was just I was constantly changing the paper out, which defeats the whole purpose because you want to keep that color that you've blended there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll crack it open.
Maybe you just need to use more water.
Yeah, maybe I just need to use more water. So I'm using a slightly different dry brush now. So I'm going to go over all.
Oh yeah, someone in chat says don't use the paper that comes with the wet palettes. Use it's a kitchen material. I forget what the name of it.
Parchment paper.
Parchment paper.
Yeah.
You want to use that parchment paper.
That is something that I did not do. I did not use the parchment paper. I just used the stuff that they sent.
It definitely makes a difference.
And that's actually another thing Hunter told me.
Oh yeah, Hunter's in here. That was him.
That was him.
He recommends don't use the paper that comes with it.
So I'm going over all my blue areas with this cold steel.
You're just painting it on there, right? It's not.
It's sort of dry brushing, sort of just painting. I am aiming to miss the crevices, and the reason for that is because the metallic paint will always be a little bit more glossy than your standard paint.
Right.
So if I do this correctly, the metallic paint on the surface will be a little bit more repellent of the wash that I'm going to put on later. Whereas the blue colored paint has a little bit more texture to it, and so it will soak it in a little bit more. It'll help to draw the ink into these crevices.
Oh, that's cool.
This is actually not my technique. It was a friend's then girlfriend, now wife, who did this, and I stole it from her.
Nice.
And her name is Jen Cotton. I don't even know if I should call her out. I want to give her credit, but Maybe she doesn't need this notoriety in her life right now. So again, we're gonna have to let that dry a little. But actually, it also looks. I think it just kind of looks cool just as it is. Maybe it doesn't even need a wash, because these are all sort of futuristic, right? So
Right.
maybe if you have weird
It could be
blue
plastic,
metal,
you know?
right? Who knows what it is? So maybe if you have weird blue metal, um, I'm going off center.
Oh, other way.
Yep.
There you go.
It's always so hard to follow reverse.
Right.
But yeah, maybe you have this weird bluish metallic. It'll look cool for cars anyway.
Maybe some of it would look good with the wash.
Yeah. All right, so I showed how to get a little detail with a stencil. Let's do a little actual freehand. This is a lot trickier. So what I'm going to do is I have this. I chose this method because this is one of the ones I'm more comfortable with. But I have a little car here that I already started with, and I'm going to try to show you guys how to put some flames on there. Just adding a little water to this yellow. So for this guy, I did start with an airbrush. It's yellow, and then with an orange airbrush over it to get a nice clean gradient. And now, this is one of the things that I think, the reason why I want to show this specifically is because it's simple, but it tells you a lot about sort of good freehand practices. So I want, fiery flames coming down the hood of my car. And so just intuitively, the way your brain says you're going to do that is you're going to paint, orange and yellow flames over the base. But it's actually better to do it the other way around. And the reason why I think this is good method for freehand is because a lot of when you freehand, whatever you're going to freehand onto a model, removing and adding are both equally important, right? So if you want to just paint the letter A, you might start with just a normal triangle and then paint out some of the little bit in the middle, just to give a weird example. But let me just get started. So I'm going to be painting what your art teacher would call the negative space of these flames. And because I don't want to screw up this cool gradient, I'm going to start with yellow to just give me like a guide. And then I'm going to come back over that later with a darker color. So we're going to try, this is a different angle than I'm used to. So it might not look as nice as if I was doing it not towards a camera. I'm also going to switch to a smaller brush. So we're going to try to get these cool hot rod flames to come down.
There's some comments that you have very steady hands.
It's funny because just the angle I'm doing this, they don't feel steady at all. I feel like they're shaking a lot because this is not my normal.
Right.
This is not the normal position I'd be in.
Well, you could hold it normally and then just show us the results every once in a while.
Yeah, but I figure it's not too different.
Okay.
Normally, this would be like about 4 inches from my face.
Yeah.
And like what I do is I usually steady, like I have the whole thing with as much, like I'm sort of contacted at as many points as possible just to steady it.
Uh-huh. So do you ever have to deal with like hand fatigue from holding models for so long?
Definitely.
Because that's something that I find, especially as I get older.
Yeah.
It gets a lot harder to sit there for a long time.
It's not so much fatigue, but I mean, this is one of the things that for me, even though it's the sort of thing I always thought I would want to do for a living, I don't think I could ever be a full-time professional miniature painter because after like one day spending 8 hours painting, my hands will usually hurt a lot. I can feel a lot of pain in my joints. 2 or 3 days of that in a row, that's just rough.
Have you ever used a, like something that you attach the model to, and then hold on to that a little bit?
No, I just don't know how I could make that work because so much of it, I'm using both hands.
Right.
I use sort of both hands just to arrange it, right? It's more than where this hand is. I'm also going to be moving the model around with this other hand to make sure that it's I'm painting in the right spot.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I've tried using like pill bottles and stuff and blue tack, and I always feel like the models always fall off, so it's never worked out for me.
Mm. Oh wait, I think maybe maybe I misunderstood the question, but
yeah, like have you ever used a paint handle?
I kind of make my own.
Oh, okay.
And I'll show that in just a second. But so that's kind of our start there. You can kind of see the flames taking shape. Again, this is something that if I wasn't on a stream, I would take a lot longer with. Go very slowly and make sure all these are kind of like a good shape, because right now they almost look kind of like crab claws pinching upward. So we're going to give the yellow a little bit to dry. I've got actually one of them right here. We're talking about paint handles. So
okay, yeah.
This is something that's more important for like these guys. You really are not going to want to base, or you're not going to want to glue one of these to the final base, which is like a cool translucent color. You want to be able to paint it and then, just stick it on when you're done. So what I have is it's a push pin, and I have some putty on it, and I just put it in there, and a little bit of it is connecting on the inside,
right.
and I'm actually driving that in there to try to hold it in place, and then
the push pin is actually going into the model?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I do other things, that's going to be stuck in probably on like the foot or something, and that's part of because whatever I'm doing it for, I always want to do the basing separately, and then glue the model onto the finished base. All right, what can we do? What can we go back to?
Yeah, Hunter's saying he has to use a paint handle because his hands are always rubbing paint off.
Yeah, that can be a thing.
I just usually use gloves. So, some like latex gloves, especially if I'm airbrushing.
I think that would just drive me crazy. I get gloves. Not gloves. I get paint all over my hands when I'm airbrushing, and I did the full Studio Ogre Army all yellow, and when that was done, like my whole arm, like my whole upper arm and hand was yellow because I didn't stop to wash it off. Yeah, that might be a good time to wear a glove, but I did not. All right, I was just gonna do a rec real quick. This is another one that was just sort of set up to be a quick paint job. I started with the same, I was showing this earlier, this rusty red old paint. And then because this is supposed to be wrecked and messed up, it should be really easy to just go over it with any other color you want. Let's do a different blue. I have the Signar blue highlight. It's a really nice saturated blue. So we're just going to do a little bit of that over this, and so it's the dark red base coat primer with this time it's Nuln oil. That's kind of everybody's favorite GW wash. Over that,
I don't know. I like Agrax.
Agrax, yeah, that's good too. And I've given it time to dry. So we're just gonna do a little blue dry brushing over this guy and see if we can make a cool beat up looking car real quick.
So this is basically a blue dry brush over a red base coat?
A red base coat with a black wash, yeah.
Black wash, okay.
So we just want to get kind of a little bit of appearance of color because this is a car that's been totally trashed. The reason why I want the red there is just because it's one of those things that your eye and your brain notice more than you do consciously. Just having that bit of extra color there coming through,
Right.
it just sort of makes the whole thing pop, makes it a little bit more interesting.
Do you ever use any other like contrasting color combos
I,
for
it's
this kind of
something.
thing?
It's something that I try to think about all the time.
I guess this would be qualify as terrain, right? Because it's a wreckage.
It's a game piece. It's sort of like terrain. I don't know. I haven't seen the final. I wasn't in charge of laying out the final rules, so I don't know.
Right.
Maybe if there's like any missions in there where you start off with like a bunch of wrecks, which could be in play, which could be kind of cool. And of course, it's something that anybody out there could do. But no, these are when your car takes all its final damage, you leave it there because the other cars can still get bonuses to their defense rolls and for being behind it, and they can still, if I remember correctly.
It can act as cover and
Yeah, it can act
an
as cover, and you can
obstacle.
run into it, and
Right.
you could maybe even run it into somebody else if you
Or
wanted to be
ram someone
crazy.
into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now what I've done, I've just mixed a little bit of this frostbite in with the base blue. We're just going to go a little over that a little bit more.
So once you're dry brushing with a lighter color, are you thinking about building up different areas of the model, or?
You can, if you really want to be thoughtful and fancy about it, you can concentrate them more on top, and that will kind of give the impression of a strong highlight. But I'm not really like thinking that in depth into it. And then yeah, so just in a few minutes, and well, plus the time I did to prep it earlier, you got a pretty cool looking beat up car with you're not, and like I said, when you look at it, you don't really think about the red, but I really think it adds something um, in the long run.
Yeah.
And then because it's blue and blue and silver work really well together, I can just go and grab some more of that cold steel and just sort of put it on these hubcaps pretty quick. No big deal. These little bits that used to be guns. No big deal. Oh, and up here too. Yeah, and then really just figure out what you want to do for the windshield. Um, let's do yellow, which is probably a bad idea because it's very transparent. But that's the cool thing about the Rex. The Rex are just a chance to have fun and go crazy because if it doesn't look right, well, it's because it's wrecked, stupid.
Right.
Anybody who complains that your wreck doesn't look right, I mean, come on.
It's burnout, man.
Yeah, what the heck? And I'm not sure why, but I want some more black down in here. Dang it! It's too red. It's not dark enough.
Someone says Nuln Oil, liquid skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that stuff. I love Agrax Earthshade too. Those are my favorite Citadel washes.
Yeah, and I think it's saying something that me who like does this professionally for part of my day job and sometimes on the side, I still have Nuln Oil, right? I still use it. It's still even on like my like highest level paint jobs, there's a place for Nuln Oil somewhere where it's just like I just need some like quick black lining, so I'm just gonna Nuln Oil that and it's done.
Yeah, it's like the Gibson Les Paul of the paint world. It's just a classic. It works well.
Yep.
Still
And
sounds good today.
here's some of that Agrax going over the yellow.
All right, yeah.
And so yeah, so that's just a really quick wreck, and I think he looks pretty rad. It looks pretty rad. Scarab, destroyed but still looking good. Could be room for just a little more of that frostbite, pure now, not mixed in with anything. You can kind of, this is where you can kind of be conscious about maybe going along the edges, like somebody was talking about, like putting it in certain specific places. What's funny is like the studio version of this, I spent so much longer on, like so much longer on. I don't really know if it looks that much better. Because it's just a wreck, right?
Sometimes it's good to just get it done quickly and see how good it can get.
Yeah.
And do that every once in a while just to to see, right? See the difference between taking your time and or just getting something done quick and dirty.
All right. So let's go back to this fellow. Is it Sledge? What is this thing's name? It's driving me crazy now. This is one of the first ones I did. It might have been the second one I did originally. I'm going to throw something different out your way. Everybody likes Nuln Oil. Privateer Press also makes a black. Now this is where they're funny. They actually do their inks in bottles. Their Armor Wash, I don't think they even have a black ink. What they call it instead is Armor Wash. And I really like it. I'm annoyed that it's in a dropper bottle, but it works really well. It is a little bit better about going into the cracks than Nuln Oil for me, but it dries very glossy. So if you don't plan on fixing or sealing your models when you're done with a matte sealant, it can be kind of frustrating. All right. So we're just going to wash that on.
Somebody says the real black trick is Tamiya panel liner. I haven't tried that.
I haven't tried that specifically either.
I think Hunter says that.
I swear by their primers, and there's a couple other things I use of theirs. There was the orange tape I was showing earlier.
Yeah.
And they also have this weird thing that they sell. It's like a bag of Q-tips. But what they are is they're like just they're like very, very, very fine sanding tools. So if you have like an uneven layer of clumpy paint, if you try to just use like a miniature file, you'll just wreck that whole area. But you can use their little these little Q-tips that they make, and you can sort of sand down an uneven area of paint. Or if you get like a freaking hair in there, if that's ever happened to you before, whether it's one of your own or a pet's that gets covered in paint, you can just sort of rub it with these little things and it'll come out. And then you can
Tamiya makes that? What's it called?
I forget. You know what? I did say earlier I would check my phone history to see what airbrush compressor I ordered. So I'm going to look at those real quick while I look at that. So yeah, we've got this guy. Hopefully, I don't know if you can see him. Let's sort of try to set him up and give everyone something to look at while I'm doing the least interesting thing a person has ever been filmed doing, which is looking at their phone. All right, so the airbrush compressor that I bought and have been really happy with so far is a Master Airbrush 15 HP Cool Runner 2 dual fan air compressor kit. And it was only $89.96.
Nice.
And it is, yeah, Master Airbrush is the brand. I don't know. I can send that to you, I think.
Can you send it to me in
Yeah, I can send it to you in Hangouts, and maybe
Yeah.
you can just like
I'll
toss
see if
it
I
up
can
there.
link to it.
Boom. Sent. And then the little Q-tip things are Tamiya America Incorporated Craft Cotton Swab Triangle Medium 50 piece. And so like I was saying, these are just something that you can use to sort of sand down uneven paint on a model. Did you get the last one? All right, you should have 2 Amazon links sent to your Hangouts.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to this guy from earlier, our little rust bucket. I'm going to do a little dry brushing on him, on it, to try to bring out some of the edges. This is another one where you want just really, 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 really thin paint. So first I have to get all the water off this stupid brush because I left it sitting in the water cup. Just gonna get some white, pure white. It's pretty lightly colored anyway. The only bad thing about dry brushing white is when you're using a napkin like this, it's gonna be really hard to see exactly how much has been taken out of the brush.
Yeah.
All right, so that's like very little left, so that should be pretty easy. Just go over the sides. And what I'm really hoping is it just sort of, when you do salt weathering like this, it actually does leave a little three-dimensional area around all those little salt crystals. So hopefully this will pick them out even more. And it's not really working the way I wanted it to. Let's just try some clean lines down the edges. What I'm going to try to do now is called edge highlighting. It's just a nice, easy way to get, there we go, to get a little detail. So the way you do it with that is you use the side of the brush and just go down the edges. And this is where having that steady hand is really useful. And you just want to get a little line along everything. And this is another thing that it just works so well with an airbrush because you can use an airbrush to spray on some really loose highlights, and then you just do that edge highlighting over it, and it just looks really good. You still need a steady hand, but it's not as like time consuming as some other stuff you could do if you really want to try to do all the wet blended highlights and stuff, and it just looks really effective a little bit more easily. Now I have orange, but because it's P3, it's not called orange, it's called Kador Red Highlight. And what I'm going to do, I want to get some more rust in there. So I'm going to do some like, kind of like, not just a pure wash. I don't really know what the right word for this technique is, but we're going to be a little bit more discriminate about where we put this agrax. Instead of just putting it everywhere, I'm going to try to put it in a few select places. Smear what I don't want off with my finger. And then, while it's still wet, I'm going to take this orange, and I'm just going to like sort of stick some of it in there. You can also use maybe a little bit of red. There's another really good color that P3 makes for rusty stuff called Bloodstone. So it's like an orange ochre kind of color. You can throw a little bit of that in there too. And that can kind of help. And while you're doing this, you can also add a little bit more definition to some of these smaller panels. Maybe go a little crazy over here, just get it really into all these little crevices and stuff. Let's do something else that's kind of cool. This vehicle has these weird sort of copper tubes. Well, they're not copper, but we're going to make them look copper. These tubes that run down the side. So I'm going to start those You know what? I just realized I don't have any copper paint, but whatever. We're going to start those with this like pale sort of patina looking blue. And then, because this vehicle is supposed to be kind of rusty, whereas with this guy, I went over all the guns with like a blue, because it's sort of supposed to be a cleaner vehicle. For this rust bucket, I'm going to use Umbral Umber, which is a dark brown. And then hopefully when I dry brush over that with that metal, it'll create kind of a dirtier, dingier look. And let me I'm gonna do some of that same copper patina on these tubes here. I don't know exactly what they're for. Maybe they're coolant, maybe they're not. And then we'll let this guy dry for a bit. I'm not even going to try to cover the whole thing. Let's see. Maybe now we can go back to our little hot rod earlier. I'm trying to find the perfect color to go over everything with. Oh, here it is. It's over here. So now that I've done these little yellow parts, this would make it a lot more easy for me to correct any of these things if I didn't like the way they turned out. So, you know, if I like thought that this flame over here could do a little bit better, well, you know, yellow, this orange covers yellow a lot more easily than it would something else. So that's why you sort of do that like first little trace or whatever you want to call it with the yellow. But now let's say that I'm good, I'm happy with everything, and I want to do the rest of the car in this dark blue. I'm using Exile Blue. Now that we have that guide painted in orange, oh no, there's water on the tip. That's no good. That's an annoying thing that I've still never gotten around, is when you get a little bit of water, like a little bead of water, like halfway up the brush, and you don't notice it. And then while you're painting it, like drips down.
Right.
Causes everything to bleed. All right, so back to where we were. So fortunately, as long as it's something like that, you know, if you catch it while it's wet, it's not a big deal. So again, I'm moving a little faster here than I would, because I just want to get a little bit of general instruction rather than like the most perfect looking flame paint job ever done. And I specifically picked a dark blue just because getting vibrant looking flames in orange and yellow on such a dark color, if you did it, you know, the more intuitive way where you paint the flames onto the car rather than what I'm doing where I'm painting the car paint over the flames, it could take a really long time. And auto enthusiasts will know that real hot rod flames are also, they're very weird and long and spindly. And it's the sort of thing where, like, out of the context of them being on a car, I don't even know if they would like look like flames. But when you put them on a car, then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, those are flames. That's what those are. Because they're really a little odd looking. will need a second coat just because it's looking a little green.
I think we'll need to wrap it up after this one.
Okay. I was wondering how we were doing on time.
Yeah, it's a little after 3 at this point.
Okay. Yeah, but once you've got that part down, you know, you can just go over the rest of the car. And that's when you would do all the rest of the paint. And just, since you don't need to worry about that, you know, you can use a nice big brush. So yeah, hopefully that was all helpful stuff. Let me do like 90 seconds of wet blending just because it is something that baffles a lot of people, but it's really not that hard. And I kind of wanted to get into some of that. Do I have a better, let's use sanguine base. So the easiest way to get quick highlighting is indeed with an airbrush, but I'm just going to do a little bit of quick red wet blending on this guy. Now for me, I'm sure everybody does it a little bit differently, but for me, it's something that I build up in layers. But basically, you just start off, you know, you get pretty bold with it. You want to start with the lighter color. And then if you have a big surface like this, you can use a big brush and it just makes it that much easier. So all that's still wet on there. And I'm just going to come in now with the this darker red. And as you can see, I'm pulling a little bit more off the brush each time. This is the sort of tricky part, is how much you have on the brush at any given time. Because sometimes you're adding with the brush and sometimes you're taking away. Right now, I'm actually removing a little bit of paint as I go. So you can see I keep wiping it against my hand to try to put less paint on the brush because I'm actually kind of picking it up as I go. So I go down there now. Let's get a little bit more red. So I mean, like, here is my palette. You know, we were talking about wet palettes earlier. Mine it's just on my hand. That's just all I know.
That's
Maybe I
why
need to
have the
find a wet
gloves.
palette I can wear like a ring and have it back here. And then let's just use some, here we go. We'll use some of this Heartfire as like a final highlight. And what you want to do is just sort of try to use the shape as your guide and just, it's a little bit too translucent. Let's just throw some white in there. The tricky part with red is not making it look pink.
Right.
Now, if you want to get really, really fancy, this is more fancy than I typically even do. You can throw some multiple lights around and really try to pick up all on, you know, using paint on the illusion of all these little dots that you can see from the studio lighting.
Right.
And that's the really tricky part. Cars are just a little hard in general because they have that glossy automotive paint that just reflects light in really weird ways that aren't, you know, that often don't seem like that's the way the shape of the object should be reflecting light, if that makes any sense. So it can make the paint job kind of tricky. But yeah, so that's just a really quick, a lot of wet blending is just confidence. It's just being willing to just like go in there and just be like, because you have to work fast to get the wet paint the way you want it. So you just got to be willing to jump in there and just do it. Just mess with it. And just, you know, if it doesn't look right the first time, you fix it, you paint over it, and you'll get it the next time.
Right.
All right, were there any more questions?
Oh, everyone wants to see all the cards we've done this stream.
Oh, all the cards. Yeah.
Quick.
All right, so here's our little stiletto, who is red. I think this guy is Jackal. Oh, there's still a little, let's see.
Yeah.
This fella our cool scarab wreck.
Yeah, that green guy turned out really good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and that one. I mean, that could be done. I think it
yeah.
needs some black on the tires, and I would like to see another coat of red on the windshields, but that's mostly done. And here's poor wrecked dragon that only really showed up today to be a guide for the primer I used. If I was finishing this guy up, what I would do is dry brush copper over this blue, and then just give it that same wash with the armor wash. And that's an effect I've used a lot. I think it looks really rad. And it's a cool way, especially on cars, if you're gonna try to do like a more junky paint job. It's just a really cool way to add some color that wouldn't be there otherwise, because it's normally gonna be like browns and reds and oranges on a rusty paint job. So you throw some of that blue in there, and it's a really cool extra bit of color. Oh, let's see. Can't really see that guy. There's like a lid in the way. I'm not sure which one it is. Yeah, that's a little better. But yeah, cool. I hope everybody learned something. I hope there were some useful techniques in there. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you will grab some of these guys when they come out if you don't already have them from the Kickstarter. But yeah, thanks for watching the stream. Thanks for coming to FNordCon, and have an awesome weekend. I'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.